I think collaboration is an essential component to the innovation and the advancement in creating these more resilient, sustainable supply chains. Because there's also an issue around um, right aggregate quantity of more sustainable ingredients in the marketplace, right? And so if you're a single company and you want to be out there at the forefront, right, and you want ethically raised, environmentally responsible, socially responsible, highly nutritious food, right, each of these components might add additional cost. And then we have an equity issue, which is okay, but the average person can't afford this food, right? And so we're creating other equitable issues in that supply chain as well. And so I really think what's key is that we bring brands together, right? So there's not a single company that's affording or financing the entire cost of building the supply chain.
Hello, and welcome to the Pet Food Science Podcast, where our goal is to share new information to support and to continue to innovate in the pet food industry. I'm your host, Dr. Kate Shoveler, and I'm here today with Caitlyn Dudas. Caitlyn is the co-founder of the Pet Sustainability Coalition, a nonprofit that advances businesses through environmental and social business practices. Caitlyn is a 2022 Power 50 winner, a 2019 Women of Influence recipient, winner of the 2019 Vanguard Award, and a 2017 40 Under 40 Award recipient in honor of her innovative approach to bringing together industry leaders to strengthen their businesses while also leading the industry towards a future where pets, people, and the planet prosper. Between 2013 and 2023, Caitlyn served as executive director and co-founder, where she grew the coalition from 8 founding corporate members to a thriving community of 200 plus pet companies that actively measure and improve their impact through the Pet Sustainability Coalition's sustainable business services. The Pet Sustainability Coalition has pioneered collaborative solutions that advance sustainable ingredients, sustainable packaging, climate action, and social responsibility. Her leadership has led to notable successes, including Flex Forward, the industry's first return to retail plastic collection program, the DEI challenge that inspired the pet industry to take more than 6,000 individual actions towards a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive industry, and boldly bringing together industry competitors to break down competitive barriers through a unified vision toward an inclusive, vibrant, and more sustainable industry. Caitlyn now leads the PSC's work to advance sustainable ingredients through the development of research and by convening pet industry brands and suppliers to increase supply and use of climate-friendly ingredients. Notable research includes the PSC's 4-factor framework, a foundation for evaluating sustainable ingredients, and the blueprint for responsible sourcing of animal protein ingredients. Welcome, Caitlyn.
Thank you so much, Kate. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited too. I think that this is an extremely important topic, and the work that PSC has done enables the industry to make advancements forwards in this regard. So I thought first, so everybody has a little bit of an idea of where you come from and what PSC, and now I think your work for the Good Company focuses on as well. Would you mind describing a little bit about the work that PSC and now the Good Company that you work for does as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, it's really important to start with the foundation of a common understanding of what are we talking about when we talk about a sustainable ingredient, because there are so many broad definitions of sustainability that a lot of people could be thinking about different things when they're having this conversation. And so at the Pet Sustainability Coalition, we really recognize that need for developing that foundational definition. So when we talk about a sustainable ingredient, we measure that holistically, right? So it's not just an ingredient that has a good environmental impact. It's an ingredient that looks at 4 holistic factors. Those factors are nutrition, environmental impact, social impact, as well as animal welfare. And so when we measure all 4 of those factors for ingredients, we're able to see the trade offs of each ingredient and know where to focus our time and energy and money to improve our impact. So that's really kind of the basics of what we talk about when we mean a sustainable ingredient. And with the work for the Good Company, it's similar, right? So it's thinking about how do we really advance the use of these ingredients in the pet food industry, recognizing that we use up to 25% of the animal ingredients raised in the United States. And so, how do we really leverage our businesses to create more opportunity for the use of sustainable ingredients across the pet food sector?
At Allura Pets, our commitment to biotechnological innovations empowers you to craft superior products that redefine pet wellness standards. Whether enhancing nutrient bioavailability, promoting gut health, or boosting immunity, our science-backed solutions give your formulations a competitive edge in the pet market. Trust Allura Pets to deliver scientifically proven ingredients that elevate your portfolio to new heights. Visit us at www.allura.bio/pets to learn more.
Great. Well, let's dig into that a little bit more. You mentioned quite a few aspects that both companies, in a bit of a different way, look at. So let's maybe start with what everybody usually thinks about when they think about the word sustainability. And I totally agree with you. It's only one aspect. Let's start first with the work around climate action. And when I say climate action, so not just talking about the impact of a single ingredient, but the use of that ingredient through the entire food chain as well, and particularly through manufacturing, transportation, and then sale to the consumer. So, what are the aspects that PSC and the Good Company really focus on when you're talking about the work that you do that's focused on reducing the impact on the globe, on the climate, and everything combined with that?
Well, Kate, first I would really think about, the pet food industry is a pretty substantial player in the global, right, the global food market. So when we think about the agricultural supply, sometimes the pet industry thinks of itself as this kind of little niche industry, but really it participates in the global food system. And so when we think about climate, right, and we think about, okay, I'm sourcing one ingredient, and a lot of folks sometimes, they focus on local sourcing, for example. But I think some of the tools that are really helpful in understanding the total footprint of a product, right, is doing something like a life cycle analysis, where you understand from farm. I say farm to Fido, right? Farm to Fido, and all the stages in that process, right? Producing the ingredient, processing the ingredient, manufacturing the ingredient, then like there are many stages of manufacturing in pet food, right? So there's the extrusion, there's the rendering, there's the putting it in a bag, there's the refrigeration, and there's so many kinds of pet food, right? And then there's the transportation of that to a retail center. Then there's the housing of it at retail, right? If you're a frozen food, you have to be in a freezer, which has an energy cost. So there, if you really think about, right, the total footprint of an ingredient, it goes through this entire process. And so if you look across all of those, the number one impact area is really the production, right? So we know that there's a concentrated carbon footprint around the production of that ingredient. And so that means, right, the farming of it, how it's raised, and then how does it get to the manufacturing facility? Manufacturing is important too, right? There's a high energy footprint to the manufacturing process. And then you have transportation and retailing. But really, if you go to the production of it, right, which for many companies isn't something they always control, right? Most companies are not vertically integrated. They're buying ingredients from a manufacturer. And so the production of that is a little bit hard for them to control. But what we're seeing in the regulatory landscape is really a shift, right? So by 2025, US companies have to report at least scope one of their carbon emissions. And that's just, their building. But eventually, when you get to scope three, right, that's really looking at the carbon footprint of your ingredients and the producers that are making those ingredients. And that's really tough, right? But that's also where the most of our impact is. And so that's really where I see a lot of the supply chain work and the impact of our ingredients being focused in that production part of the supply chain.
Yeah, maybe I'm just a little bit curious, and it's also because some of the interactions that I've had in the past where and I think about this a little bit more on the animal welfare side, which I've done a little bit more consulting on for ingredient selection. But I always find it fascinating that yeah, I'll start with, you realize that you're going to have to pay more for that ingredient when people put more effort and more finances into ensuring that they are doing this responsibly. I'm just curious, how do you talk to the industry, which is largely revenue driven? Not saying that they don't want to do the right thing either, they do, but there's this balancing act. How do you talk about that balancing act? Because we do need investment to improve where we are today.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So, and this is really where I think collaboration is an essential component to the innovation and the advancement in creating these more resilient, sustainable supply chains. Because, there's also an issue around, right, aggregate quantity of more sustainable ingredients in the marketplace, right? And so if you're a single company and you want to be out there at the forefront, right, and you want ethically raised, environmentally responsible, socially responsible, highly nutritious food, right, each of these components might add additional cost. And then we have an equity issue, which is okay, but the average person can't afford this food, right? And so we're creating other equitable issues in that supply chain as well. And so I really think what's key is that we bring brands together, right? So there's not a single company that's affording or financing the entire cost of building the supply chain. And if you think about it, right, the pet industry right now, the industries that are really taking the brunt of the cost for the sustainable agricultural shifts that are needed, right, are generally human food companies, right? So if you think about a restaurant or a chicken company that's putting chicken breast in a package at a grocery store, right now they're bearing the brunt of those costs because they're not able to bring in all of the rest, the whole animal ingredients, and those brands that are using not just the breast, right, but the whole animal. If those companies participate, it actually brings down the total cost of the transformation toward more sustainable agricultural and farming practices. And so, first of all, the pet industry has a lot to add to the economics of this system. And then, if you bring together collaborators so that there's not a single brand who's taking on the risk or the cost or the certification scheme of, right, this transformation, then you're really able to share that more broadly across an industry. And so, some ingredients right now do have a higher premium if you want transparent and traceable ingredients. And right, we have to kind of transform the entire system to improve traceability and transparency. And I think we can do that best by collaborating across multiple multiple stakeholders working together.
Yeah, I love that approach, and I think that this is a good opportunity as well for everybody to consider. And I think I'm well known for pushing this a lot, but I have the advantage in Canada that there are multiple federal granting agencies that recognize the impact of the pet food industry. So I have different grants available to me in Canada, and that also allows me to bring people together and then keep any individual at a little bit of a further distance, which is beneficial sometimes as an academic. But the US does not have these federal programs to support the pet food industry in particular, and I very much understand what the historical background to these opportunities not being in pet. We don't eat pets. Pets are still, well, not still, they have evolved into maybe a little bit more of a luxury item, which I know that there's a lot of companies working on that as well, because we can maybe transition to social responsibility in a second, because it's one of the first things I talk about with my class is, should we make it cost prohibitive to own a pet? And I can argue a lot of different aspects of this, but as a mom, when I see the evidence for dogs and cats in particular being that safe companion for children, that's always where my first inkling is, well, every child deserves a pet. It probably makes their lives a lot better. So, I've digressed a little bit here, but my point being about the responsibility of the whole industry to come together to support more research and not only more research, but to also support more academic opportunities, because we can do things at an arm's distance. We are public servants, whether we're on the north side of the border in Canada or the south side of the border, if they're at land grant universities as well. So we give that aspect of being a little bit separate from the university or from the industry. But it's really important that the industry, and you're bringing this together for the sustainability quotient, allows that opportunity to get independent funds where everybody has a single vested interest. So, can you talk a little bit about some of the research that you're hoping to also support as PSC? And then I know a little bit less about the good company, but if you could maybe talk about them as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first, there is a recent increase in grant funding from the US Department of Agriculture right now. Billions of dollars have been released between 2023 and 2028 to invest in what they call climate smart agriculture. And so PSC, the Pet Sustainability Coalition, was selected as a sub awardee of a $35 million grant specifically around increasing the value of regeneratively raised bison and beef products in the pet food industry. And so we'll see a lot of activity in this space specifically from our organization. But as we see funding increase specifically for sustainable proteins, we do have, one of the major focuses of our organization is a desire to bring forward more agnostic and holistic research, right? Again, defining a sustainable ingredient by all four key factors, and bringing data to the forefront that hasn't been engineered or developed by a specific company that has specific outcomes and desires for that research. And most companies, right, are investing millions of dollars in their own research that then supports their product development process and their marketing of their products. And that's not a shared resource for the industry. And so every company is playing this rat race, right? And it's incredibly expensive. So it certainly favors those who have big budgets for research, and smaller disruptive brands that want to focus on sustainable supply often don't have those capabilities. And so the Pet Sustainability Coalition has focused on education from its beginning, right? How do we bring forward incredible education that comes from other leading industries too, right? We see pet generally about not that much anymore, right? A 12-month laggard behind the human food space. And so how do we leverage research that's being done, right? We're all sharing the same supply chains, right? So how do we leverage those resources and bring it into pet? But also, how do we develop agnostic and informative research that the whole industry can use to help their teams be able to develop strategies for future resilient sourcing of the ingredients that we rely on to feed our pets? And so, a couple of things that we've already produced, the four factor framework is really, I think it's about 10 pages or so. And again, it's the foundation, right? What are these four factors and what's the state of the agricultural system in those four key factors? So that's a great, just kind of baseline understanding, I think, for everyone in the pet industry to wrap their mind around sustainable production and what's the impact of the system that we're supporting when we don't choose sustainable, right? What is the state of agriculture in the US today? And then the blueprint. So the blueprint just launched a couple of weeks ago. We just had a webinar. Our team did an excellent job kind of foraying it to the pet industry. It's a much larger document, but it looks specifically at 9 different species and what are the most material impacts across those four factors to consider when you're sourcing those animals. So it really helps companies know where to start, right? If I look at what I'm using today in my supply chain, how can I do better without substituting ingredients? How can I do better within the system that I'm already in? And then how can I start to consider alternative ingredients? And so that blueprint is really meant to be an actionable tool, right? How can companies start looking at, hey, what am I supplying today? What are the major animal welfare issues, environmental issues, social issues related to those ingredients? And how do I start to take action by working in partnership with our suppliers and our producers and our manufacturers to start to unify, right? Here, not just one brand, right? And this is the role of companies like the Pet Sustainability Coalition, but how do we unify the industry behind a common understanding of, a definition or a standard for sustainable ingredients so that producers and manufacturers, right, have a clear signal to say, hey, it's worth investing. It's expensive, right, for producers to and manufacturers to invest in the equipment needed, to do batch manufacturing, for example, and not just run it, right, on a constant conveyor belt. And so I think as an industry, right, learning what are the signals that we give? How do we bring education, collaboration to the forefront so that folks can really learn about innovation that's happening in the pet food space, and start to take action within their supply chain to understand where they are today and start setting goals for where they want to get to in the future. With Good Company, so Good Company is, as I was transitioning out of the Pet Sustainability Coalition, I knew I really wanted to be in supply chain because where the rubber meets the road is the place where there's the most impact. And so I wanted to take the decade of experience that I'd had understanding the complexity of the pet food supply chains, and connecting brands with manufacturers and producers who are committed to a more sustainable supply chain for the pet food industry. And so, I launched an LLC. It's brand new. It's only been around for about 60 days. So it's very new. And I'm really just kind of introducing myself into this space, and learning, how can I continue to really lend my skill set to the climate solution. And the pet food industry just doesn't quite understand how valuable it is to participate, right? If you think about whole animal utilization, you've got apparel and textiles that are coming in to use parts of the animal. You've got human food that's coming in to use primary meat cuts. And then you've got the pet food industry that can really create total economic success for the transition toward more sustainable agricultural practices by showing up and participating in this movement so that we're sharing the responsibility and the cost across all three industries and using, right, leaning into whole animal utilization so that for every animal we raise, 100% of that is being used as close to where it was raised as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I think too, I might add there, I work with a lot of ingredient companies on a lot of different ingredients, and I'm really making them think about it too. So even before they approach pet food companies, so there's a lot of ingredient companies that are interested in positioning their ingredients for the pet food industry. One of the things that I've talked to them quite a bit about is what is your environmental benefit here in contrast to similar ingredients that you might be replacing, or similar ingredients that you might be building on that ingredient supply chain. So also two ways, making sure that the ingredient companies are really thinking about really the four factors that you're talking about and how they fit into it when they're talking to pet food companies about their ingredients. And then the same thing, which is or what you're doing, which is really coming from the pet food companies to the suppliers, because I do think that a lot of suppliers are keying in when they have a more environmentally friendly ingredient in contrast to what is currently being used. So maybe both ways. So we've talked quite a bit about climate, and one of the things maybe that I wanted to touch on here, and I think it ladders well as well, is another aspect that PSC really focuses on is social responsibility. And this usually, I find in general, is a little less clear to people what that means in terms of the ingredient supply chain and then the use of those ingredients in different pet foods. So, could you talk a little bit about the work that you've done in the US? You say DEI. In Canada, we say IEDI because we've put indigenization in front of it as well. And because everybody likes to mess around with acronyms, we just put all the words in a different format. For some reason, just to confuse everyone. So, would you talk about your social responsibility pillar a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So you mentioned one of them in the intro and the bio, but really, when the George Floyd incident happened, the Pet Sustainability Coalition looked at its definition of sustainability, right? Which is what does it take for a company to thrive, and what are the resources it uses within its business, right? And at the end of the day, people are a huge component of a business's impact. And so, how does it impact the business that work for it? And that's not just immediate, right? That's not direct employees, but it's also all of the people that are touched in its supply chain, right? So when we say, "Hey, I'm getting wheat from Nebraska or Kansas or Iowa," right? Like, how are the farmers treated in that process and the processors within that? And then if you look at the meat industry, right, if you during COVID, right, it exposed a lot of the health issues related to the processing industry. It is one of the most dangerous jobs in the United States. And it's not just the people that are working there that are impacted, it's all of their families, right? And the communities that serve that industry. And so I think often when we think about diversity, equity, inclusivity, social responsibility, we're thinking about things like, a fair wage for our workers. And we haven't even really begun to think about, what about when I buy an ingredient from a supplier, right? I am enabling that supplier to manage its workforce how it does, right? And that becomes the brand's responsibility. And you're held accountable for it, right? So if you're a brand in the marketplace and something, right, like a Bangladeshi fire happens and hundreds of thousands of people die, um, you're responsible for that, right? Because you weren't there doing your due diligence and inspection in worker rights that are treat and how the people are treated in that supply chain. And so that's true in the pet industry too. And oftentimes we think, oh, here in North America, there isn't things like slave labor, for example. But you look at states like Iowa, who now, right, like, you don't have to even be 14 to work in a meat processing plant, right? So are you comfortable with video surveillance of 12-year-olds in a meat processing facility? Probably not, right? That's not the kind of connection and positive story that you want associated with your company. And so I think really thinking through, right, what is it, how does this industry support the agricultural livelihoods in our country? And how do we do that in a really positive way? Because, right, if you're an enormous producer in our country, maybe you're doing okay, right, because your margins are higher, and it's a lucrative business. But mid-size and small-size farmers and producers and processors are not doing well in our country. They're leaving, right, their agricultural communities and moving to cities where they get other jobs. And this is the food security of our country, right? And so I think, thinking a little more thoroughly about not just being an adjacent industry to human food, and what is our responsibility, right, to participate and understand what are the regulations and the workforce laws that you have inside of your business. Actually, putting boots on the ground, right, going, looking with our own eyes, experiencing that, and does it feel ethical to us to be using those ingredients? And how can we support? A lot of times I think companies think, hey, if I have a supplier that isn't really in compliance with what I would like for my code of conduct, then we should cut and go find other suppliers. And I really, I want to invite producers and processors to participate and to learn what are new ways of running their business that support their people better, right? I think everybody wants to run a good business. And so how do we support them in that process? And so the Pet Sustainability Coalition, looking at sustainable agriculture, has a huge impact on a lot of rural communities in the United States. And there's a lot of great work. If you look at many certifications, animal welfare schemes, regenerative producing, right? These things really provide a much better livelihood for the people that are in those production systems. And so there's a lot of improvements there. And then more broadly, we help a lot of companies measure things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. They can work through their membership benefits to get trainings for their teams, and to start really looking at, what is this element of our business? How do we integrate and improve? How do we even measure this, right? Many businesses don't understand that. And for the pet industry too, to think about the demographics of our customers, right? Who are the pet owners of America? How are we reflecting them? And making our industry inclusive to innovation and diversity, right? The most resilient ecosystems are those that are diverse, and the pet industry isn't all that diverse. And so I think we have a lot to gain by bringing in a wider breadth of professionals into our industry as well, to bring in new ideas and to be more reflective of our consumer base as well.
Yeah, interesting and really important. I couldn't agree with you more about diversity and enhancing the ecosystem. And I often talk to people about diversity of perspective and that ability to have those really crucial conversations that are uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk to someone who has a different belief set as you do. And great teams can have those conversations, see other points of view, and work through them. And I think that's really, really important when it comes to working on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, we've talked quite a bit about sustainable ingredients, which is your third pillar, but one thing that we haven't talked about is packaging. And the Pet Sustainability Coalition has done quite a bit of work, and of course, we all can see the packaging as one of those very tangible things about pet food that we throw out. And I know that you've done some work with packaging. So would you mind talking a little bit about, I believe it's the Flex Forward program that PSC introduced and how that works and what the next steps around packaging are too, because I think packaging is a interesting opportunity all over the place. And I'm not even going to comment on children's toys, which have such excessive amounts of packaging that I cannot even fathom why they do. But that's my little comment for the toy industry. Let's now focus on the pet.
Yes. Well, I think the pet industry is twice the size of the baby industry, so that says something about, right, our waste is important too. Um, packaging, right? If you think about the overall product environmental footprint specifically, right? Packaging is about 20% of that. 80% is what's in the bag. So I'm glad we spent a lot of time talking about what's in the bag today because that's really a critical opportunity for impact. But at the end of the day, right, consumers care a whole lot about what's in their hand. And then what's in their hand ends up being the packaging. And so the pet industry just relies on majority non-recyclable packaging. That's like the sandwich material of like 5 different plastics that can't be separated from each other, which is why many of it ends up in a landfill, or worse if it doesn't end up in a landfill. And that's billions of dollars we're throwing away, right? The amount of money that our industry spends on packaging, billions, and then we throw it in a landfill. And so there's just this, there's an environmental reason and there's a enormous financial reason of let's bring this back into more of a circular system, recover these plastics, and be able to integrate them right back into the pet industry. If packaging is possible, that would be great. If other materials, things like the mats you stand at the groomer, right, could be made from recycled packaging from our own industry. So there's lots of opportunity of what to do with this material. And so, two things need to happen. One is the industry needs to start shifting toward more sustainable materials, recyclable, refillable, or compostable materials overall, right? And so, it, it, the technology exists right now to really be able to already do that. There are recyclable large format packaging, which is the majority of plastic packaging that is used in pet food. And there are companies out there that aren't even charging a premium, so it's not like it's an enormous cost increase for many companies. But it's you have to transition all of your packaging, and that takes time too. So first thing is, long term, we need to move the type of packaging we're using to a single type of plastic that can be collected and recycled. So that's one. And so the Pet Sustainability Coalition has a recyclable, refillable, or compostable packaging pledge that companies can sign on to and then get resources and tools and a whole peer cohort group to make that happen for them. The other piece is kind of our bridge solution, right? So, what do we do with the 300 million pounds? And that was from like 2019, so way more now. What do we do with the packaging that's already in the market, right? And so the Pet Sustainability Coalition launched the first ever brand inclusive retail collection program for post consumer, so used plastic pet food and treat bags in about 120 different locations in the Pacific Northwest, retail locations. Those were reverse hauled by our distributor partner, Pet Food Experts. And then collected, and we ran 17 different recycling trials on that collected material. Earth Animal was the sponsor for that, so they were able to afford this very expensive process, right, of collecting and sorting. And that's why, like many companies have their individual programs that collect some portion of their packaging. But the Pet Sustainability Coalition really wants it to be inclusive, right? So, how can all brands participate? Because at the end of the day, a consumer already has to check the bag to find out where to take it. And then if you're only taking a few brands, right, you're really not even putting a dent in the problem at all. And so we can collect the most amount of packaging by also including all of the retail locations possible. So every retailer is eligible, every brand is eligible. Um, we're sorting the material. So we're looking at the next launch of the program. So that was in 2020. We were able to identify advanced recycling as a potential opportunity to recycle those products, which isn't as good as what most people consider recycling, which is mechanical recycling, where you kind of turn it into pellets and then and put it right back into the recycling system. This really separates all the types of plastic, and then each type of plastic has its own market. And it's not ideal, but it's the best thing in the market today. And again, because this is a bridge solution, we know that those technologies are advancing. And so we are looking at a new rollout, which is somewhere on the East Coast in early 2025, in order to continue that program. We were really early to market in 2020. It was amazing the amount of success we were able to achieve. We almost doubled our goal of the total volume we wanted to collect. We were able to find a solution, and now we're looking at the infrastructure of collecting and sorting these materials and getting them to the right places to maximize the recyclability of that material. So it's a super exciting project. The team's doing an incredible job working with all of our stakeholders to make that happen. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to see kind of the next rollout of that in early 2025.
For more than 20 years, BioOrigin manufactures high-quality yeast-based ingredients through a sustainable biotechnological process, guaranteeing full traceability from the crop to the bowl. Through specialization in the fermentation process, BioOrigin brings the right solution for specific nutritional, palatability, and health appeals, such as gut health, immune system, skin health, weight control, and more. BioOrigin's products are natural origin, non-GMO, and certified sustainable by Bonsucro. BioOrigin is your partner for high-quality, yeast-based ingredients to add value to pet foods worldwide. Learn more at bioorigin.net.
Great, thank you. And maybe for the listeners too, earlier this year, there was also actually a podcast on packaging alone. That if those who are really interested in seeking packaging solutions can also reach out and work business to business with whoever they're purchasing their packaging from as well. And not discounting Pet Sustainability Coalition, but probably both of them as at once. So I think that we've nicely dovetailed the four areas of your framework, but ultimately, to the Pet Sustainability Coalition has an accreditation program. So, can you please describe that program and maybe tell our listeners if they're interested in getting involved, how can they get in contact with Pet Sustainability Coalition and start to make moves in this arena?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the advancement of sustainability being one of the key purchasing drivers for many pet owners, there's been a strong demand within our organization for a way to communicate with consumers and B2B for companies who aren't just paying a financial amount to join the Pet Sustainability Coalition, but are really, doing a third party audited measurement to know what their environmental and social impact is, and they're really meeting a minimum standard of performance. And so that's what the Pet Sustainability Accreditation is a third-party verified assessment that you complete. And then the companies that achieve a minimum score and demonstrate improvement year after year are able to maintain their accreditation status. So I think I saw just last week that we announced our top performers, which is really an exciting. Once a year, we announce who those top performers are. And then also at Global Pet next year, there is a whole sustainability it's not just an aisle, but it's like a pavilion. So there's a stage that'll be offering environmental education. There's lots of booths. You have to be an accredited company in order to be in that section so that retailers and visitors know that they've been pre-vetted, right? Because today, right, you can call your company natural and it really has lost its meaning entirely, right? You go to the natural section and it's because they picked that on the map. And so this is really a new section that's catered to the one of the highest growth areas for products in our industry. So again, you can get great education there. You can meet with our team. You can also meet with other accredited companies and find out what they're doing to achieve their accreditation status. And this is available to members and non-members. So people and companies don't have to be a member to join. You can be a producer, or you can be a supplier, distributors, brands, all of them in those categories, and retailers can become accredited if they wish. And then, we're launching a new partnership with a company called How Good, which is an organization that has technology that really helps to evaluate environmental impact in something like an ingredient label, right? So you turn a product over, you can see its ingredients. And we're hoping that our How Good partnership will really have the opportunity to be a product level certification. Whereas today, our accreditation is a whole business lens, right? So it looks at your governance, your pay ratios, your environmental impact, but it's not different per each product. And so we're also looking at really expanding in this space through new partnerships like the How Good partnership, so that we're offering product level certification and not just business level certification as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. And a contact. If somebody wants to get in contact with PSE, how do they do this?
Yes. So we're a membership based organization. So I always recommend folks check out our website that lists membership benefits. There's 4 different tiers for consideration, and that's www.petsustainability.org. And then you can reach out and email info@petsustainability.org, and that will make its way to the right team to address your question. And then I personally am also available at Caitlyn@goodcompanysolutions.com.
It's time for our famous 3. A longer, healthier lifespan for our pets. That is EW Nutrition's target. With immunoglobulins, that target is within reach. IGY are a young generation technology platform, an innovative solution that has been tried and tested over the last decades and can now yield tangible benefits. Immunoglobulins from egg yolk improve the animal's response to pathogens in the gut or in the mouth. They're easy to administer, they're perfectly safe, and they just work. Made with passion, proven with science.
Fantastic, Caitlin. Well, we cannot end the podcast without asking you a couple of questions. I know that you know one that's coming your way, but considering that you are a strong leading woman, what advice do you give young women as they think about starting their career?
So when I started, I helped to co-found the Pet Sustainability Coalition. I did not identify as an entrepreneur. I just knew that I was a solutions-driven person. I had a master's degree in environmental management, and I met an amazing co-founder who believed in my ability to lead. And so I often tell people that big ideas aren't for other people, right? Like I thought, oh, there's this other class of people that do things like start organizations and have good ideas and actually make them stick. But I truly feel that there is so much space, especially in sustainability. It's the fastest growing industry after AI, for people that have big ideas to actually find the right team and put the right people around them to make those things happen. So believe in yourself, and vet your ideas with trusted people, and then surround yourself with good people who want you to be successful. The Pet Sustainability Coalition, right, was founded by 8 founding companies and a very small board of about 5 people who had no idea how we were going to do it, but we knew that the pet industry needed an organization to convene and lead around sustainability. And so I guess I would just say, big ideas are for everybody, and success is absolutely possible for anyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. And last but not least, cat or dog?
So I have had both a lot. I grew up on a small hobby farm where we had chickens and horses and lots of barn cats and dogs. Today, I only have one very senior pup named Gus. He's an English pointer, but I do also love cats. Just many people in my household are allergic. So sadly, I do not have one today.
Well, you can come and hang out with my two crazy female cats who are both one. And when I say crazy, I can't even explain how bad. Well, with that, thank you so much, Caitlin. This was so informative. Thank you for leading the charge on sustainability in the pet food industry, and best of luck as you transition to the good company.
Thank you so much for your time, Kate. It was a pleasure being here today.